大家好，咁啊小西咧今次嚟到 KEF 嘅 LS LUXE 嘅一個記者會啊，咁啊見到咧佢哋咧就嚟咗個英國嘅大人物啊 VP 加埋 CTO 阿 Jack 啊，咁啊喺呢一隻嘅 LS LUXE 嘅喇叭入邊咧，其實有好多唔同嘅細節咧，都係可以咧就令到嗰個聲音咧更加好之餘咧，而物料上面亦都係非常之特別嘅。即刻同大家開場睇睇個發佈會，之後咧就同阿 Jack 傾下咧，究竟呢隻喇叭喺用料上面點樣符合翻佢哋 KEF 嘅要求先。
Working with Ross is always a very interesting experience because Ross's style is very curved and organic. So when we were told that this product is going to be designed by Ross, you kind of know what you're getting. From an acoustic perspective, that's actually very good for us. So curvature, particularly on the outside of the cabinet, can really help the acoustics to work very well. And our internal process is always fairly similar, that we try and set the acoustic package before we talk to the industrial designer. So we'd already set a kind of performance target level above LS50W2 with the larger Uni-Q, and had a kind of requirements for Ross to work with on where we wanted the Uni-Q, the port, the electronics and so on. And then we hand all that package over to him, and it's up to him then to come up with some design concepts. The concept he came back with, in a way, wasn't too surprising because we were expecting something very organic. But actually what he came up with is extremely good for acoustics. The lack of edges on the cabinet really helps us give a very natural sound from the Uni-Q without diffraction effects. As you say, it's completely unlike a normal loudspeaker. There was a big challenge in saying, well, how are we going to actually take his idea and realize it in production? There's a few things that were a big challenge. So the first is, how do we make the cabinet in a material that's going to be curved like his ID, but also very strong? But luckily on this we had a bit of a head start, which is that on the LS50W2 we use a material on the baffle called BMC. We still had to figure out how do we make a full cabinet from that, and also how do we join the two halves together because it can't be molded in one piece, and then also how do we give it a kind of completely gloss paint finish, which you'll notice is something we don't do on the LS50 series at all. We found the right molding company to work with and perfected the join technique, and the benefit of BMC is it's extremely stiff. You have a very, very inert cabinet, which actually is much better than we'd normally be able to get with wood, so there was benefit there as well. There was a second part to the challenge, which was that one of the things that Ross wanted was the product to not have any exposed fixings. You look at Mu and it just looks seamless. You don't see any clue how to build it and how to assemble it. That is not easy to do in terms of mechanical engineering. So you'll notice there's no trim around the driver here. Normally that would be the way that we get the driver in and out, either during initial assembly or during service, and we don't have that. So we had to come up with a construction method that allowed us to put the driver in from the back and close it all up and hide all the screws, and that was a big challenge as well. BMC is extremely stiff and dense, so that's a good starting point. But there was quite a big challenge because with the driver being put into the cabinet from the back, we're unable to put a lot of bracing behind the walls of the cabinet. So if you take an LS50 and you look inside, there's a lot of bracing in there. But there's another key feature in here to control vibration, which is that the driver has got vibration decoupling built into it. So what that means is that the chassis actually got some intentional weak points on it. And when the driver's playing mid-range and high frequency, these weak points flex. And this helps to avoid actually sending any of the vibration from the driver to the cabinet at all. So it's kind of two parts to the story. Firstly, the material, very strong, very dense. We can mold strengthening ribs into it, but the other part is using decoupling to try and prevent vibration reaching the cabinet too. That's the Uni-Q that's already 12th generation, it's already got the MAT technology, and these were key features we wanted in the new product. The biggest difference you can see from the outside is that the cone driver is bigger. Now this is because we wanted the product performance to be a step above. A bigger cone helps us to produce louder sound and more bass. But the most exciting thing about the new Uni-Q is it's the first time we've integrated the VECO sensor technology into a Uni-Q. So integrating the VECO into Uni-Q was always our intention from day one of developing the technology. And it's one of the things that's driven our design of the VECO sensor. So with the VECO sensor, what we're able to do is detect the velocity of the driver in real time. In a Uni-Q, you have a lot of parts in the assembly already because of the tweeter sitting there in the middle of the voice coil of the mid-range. So we knew from the very start that VECO, the sensor, had to be extremely compact. So it was always the intention. But the implementation is custom for a Uni-Q. We have to squeeze in everything around the tweeter, particularly the extra magnets that we need for the VECO. So it did represent quite a big additional challenge and more development compared to what we have on Zio. British sound has a reputation for being maybe a little bit warm and sometimes a little bit soft. That's sometimes a little bit odds with what we're trying to do at KEF, where there's more of an emphasis on neutrality. In my experience, as you make the drivers and the system more transparent and reduce coloration, these two can start to merge, and that gives you the ideal situation, really. This is something that we strive for in our high-end products. So if you can really drop coloration down to a minimum, you can set the balance of the system to be very neutral, but you can still have a performance which is very non-fatiguing. And that's a traditional KEF strong asset, a loudspeaker that you can listen to for an extended period of time and keep enjoying your music hour after hour without it being fatiguing. Streaming has been a real catalyst for us, I would say, particularly as the popularity of kind of personal listening on headphones became more popular and people then got used to subscribing to music streaming services. This created a demand for speakers or hi-fi in general with these features built in. Now, that's something we really consciously embraced. And fundamentally, it's allowed us to develop products like this, where everything's fully integrated. From a loudspeaker engineer's perspective, that's an incredibly good thing. Once a speaker becomes active, we've got full control over the whole signal chain, from the streaming music file through to what they're going to hear. We can do things like we can select particular amplifiers for different drivers in the system, and it's also been, really important for us to look at developing bespoke technologies just for active that can really step up performance, such as VECO and such as the current output amplifiers that we're using here. That move has really enabled us to develop products like this. Now, of course, these products are fully versatile. They can be used even by fans of other sources too. So if you have a customer who's a fan of CD, then we have the optical input there, or even somebody who likes a turntable, they can use an external phono stage and use our aux input. So we're not trying to exclude anybody here, but certainly the chance for us to develop these kind of products is kind of thanks to music streaming popularity. I think there's probably three ways that I see AI coming in to influence the loudspeakers. So the first is not such a thing that the customer will be aware of, but AI is extremely useful for us in the development process. So maybe the most widely publicized of this is AI during code development, and there's a huge amount of code that runs on a product like this, and that can accelerate our team's development. Besides that, a lot of engineering comes down to optimizing geometries, and you can see some examples of that in KEF products. For example, the intricate geometry of the Tangerine waveguide or the MAT maze. Now, a lot of the time, the thing that blocks our progress there is our software and the ability for it to create these geometries. And I see AI as being an elevator for us there as well. But more in terms of the public and what they would see, I believe the most obvious thing you might see is AI being used during music curation. That's not necessarily something that KEF would be bringing to your customers, but for example, music streaming services should be able to do a much better job at recommending you different artists or automating playlists, or even doing curation just by you telling your mood to the product and it saying, well, how about listening to this? And I think that's very exciting because anything that can encourage us to listen more is definitely a positive as far as I can see. Then I think, in terms of more KEF kind of things, it's more making the product do things more intuitively. So things that you would like it to kind of intelligently just understand. So if there's a particular time of day that you're listening, then maybe you've got particular volume that you like to listen to, it can do that for you. Maybe there's genres of music that you prefer particular EQ modes on, and these kind of things can be just intuitively automated by AI in the future, I think. It's an area where we're still exploring. I mean, the streaming platform, the W2 platform, is constantly updated. Customers who already own our products will see that. We're able to introduce new features, new streaming services. So, in the future, maybe you'll see some updates with this kind of behavior as well. But I can't promise anything.
好啦，啱啱聽完咧 Jack 咧同大家分享咧呢一隻 LS Lux 喺技術上邊嘅一啲含量啊，咁我自己咧最深刻咧就係加入咗新嘅 VECO 系統啦，去感應翻單元嘅擺幅咧，令到佢嗰個失真可以盡量減少住咧，低頻可以更加乾淨嘅。咁再加埋而家全新呢一個嘅 Uni-Q 單元去到12代，而個 size 咧亦都比之前 LS50大啲。咁喺我哋 studio 實試嘅時候咧，都聽到嗰個聲音空間感同埋嗰個闊度咧，其實係比以前咧我哋聽過嘅所有 active 嘅喇叭咧都嚟得更加大啦，同埋音場更加闊嘅。咁呢對喇叭咧個可換性非常之高啊！咁尤其是咧喺換唔同嘅電源線啦、level 線上面咧都有好大嘅分別。咁如果大家想了解更加多呢一對喇叭嘅體質究竟會係點樣，喺我哋 studio 測試嘅時候又有啲咩效果咧，就記得睇翻我哋嗰條 review 啦。